I've never tried to conceal my heritage. Having been raised in a Catholic household defined me deeply, and my Christian upbringing still informs so much of the person I am today. But here's the question. What do you get when Hollywood's most polarizing Christian filmmaker meets Africa's youngest revolutionary leader? The outcome was one of television's most indelible moments, a broadcast that is still remembered as much for its sheer emotion as its record-breaking international audience. This is the amazing tale of how a young African captain testified of Jesus Christ with such piercing words that Mel Gibson, yes, Hollywood veteran himself, was brought to tears live on television. It all started harmlessly enough, as such routine media gigs tend to. Gibson, still enjoying the glow of his Oscar-winning epic The Passion of the Christ, was booked to appear on Global Perspectives, a late-night show focused on global issues. The agenda seemed simple. Talk about his forthcoming projects and his commitment to faith-based filmmaking. But backstage, producers had staged an upset that no one, particularly Gibson, could have foreseen. Across from him in cyberspace, live from Burkina Faso, was Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a 34-year-old military leader who had taken power in a coup just 2 years before. The contrast was stark. Gibson was seen in a sleek Los Angeles studio, his face etched from the intense spotlight of Hollywood. Traoré, meanwhile, sat in a humble office in Ouagadougou, himself in his characteristic fatigues, with a calm expression, set and determined, and with a quiet fire in his eyes. The interview began on familiar terms. Host Sarah Chin welcomed Gibson into a discussion of his career and his emphasis on spirituality. In his characteristic certainty, he outlined, "Faith has consistently been the driving force for my most significant work. When I made The Passion of the Christ, I wasn't thinking about ticket numbers. I was thinking about souls." Then the focus shifted continents. Chin brought forward Traoré as Africa's youngest head of state and requested his vision for Burkina Faso. He answered with directness and conviction. Sovereignty, independence from neocolonialism, and an assurance to serve his people, not rule over them. Leadership, Traoré underscored, has nothing to do with power. It has to do with service, with sacrifice. These are the things I have learned not from politics, but from faith. And that's when things changed. Gibson, obviously interested, leaned forward and directed the conversation down a richer road. "Captain Traoré, I understand that you are a man of religion. I've spent a great portion of my life reenacting the tale of Jesus Christ. What do you see as his message in the context of your leadership and vision for Africa?" A silence descended on the studio. The slight delay from the satellite added to the weight of the silence. Traoré's eyes wandered beyond the camera for a second, as if he were dipping into a well deep inside. Then, in soft command, he started. "Mr. Gibson," he declared firmly, "I have watched your movie The Passion of the Christ. It is a masterpiece. But Hollywood cannot hold something about Jesus, something which Africans like me sense in the very marrow of our bones." Gibson shifted forward, clearly taken by the gravity of the moment. Even host Sarah Chin stood motionless in expectation, as if perceiving that the discussion had crossed into holy territory. "In the West," Traoré went on, "you tend to present Jesus as a remote figure, a divine one, surely, but distant. A person who came down briefly, suffered enormously, and then went back up into heaven. And that is certainly true, but not the whole truth. For those of us who have been conquered, exploited, and robbed of dignity, there is another version of his story that speaks directly to our experience." His voice grew passion, not loud but deep. "Jesus was born under occupation, Roman occupation. His people were colonized, the same as mine. Rome sucked riches from Palestine just as France sucked riches from Burkina Faso. Foreign troops marched through his boyhood streets, just as I came up viewing foreign bases on my nation's ground." Gradually, the atmosphere in the studio changed. The assured Hollywood director who had begun the interview was now leaning in closer, no longer addressing the journalist as an expert but listening like a learner. "And here is what Western Christianity usually neglects," Traoré continued. "Jesus didn't just teach love and forgiveness in the abstract. He lived them as weapons, strong enough to topple empires. He was a revolutionary, not with bombs or bullets, but with truth and full spiritual emancipation. When he expelled the money changers from the temple, it wasn't just a matter of condemning religious corruption. It was a blow directly at an economic system that exploited the poor in God's name. And when he commanded us to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, he wasn't asking us to be blind followers. He was teaching us the limits of earthly power and the dominance of God's authority. By that point, everyone was staring at him. Gibson's expressive face, so well known on the big screen, was now etched with real vulnerability. The Hollywood veteran had come into the studio to discuss faith. What he was seeing, instead, was breaking down the TV screen with an intensity that few could ignore. The studio was frozen for a moment. Gibson's form remained motionless, his eyes open but unblinking, fixed on the screen as each utterance of the youthful African leader drew him further in. "Mr. Gibson," Captain Traoré started out, his tone calm but cutting. "You depicted the bodily anguish of Jesus in your film with great intensity. But listen to me, or rather, let me tell you about his spiritual revolution." His eyes narrowed. When Jesus fought against the Pharisees, the religious leaders who aligned themselves with Rome, he referred to them as vipers. When he witnessed the rich taking advantage of the poor, he said it would be easier for a camel to get through the eye of the needle than for the rich to go into the kingdom of heaven. His death saved us, sure, but his life demonstrated to us that there is another way. The words seemed to hang heavy in the air. After a pause, Traoré continued, his voice now hushed yet weighted with a conviction spanning oceans. "This is the Jesus we recognize in Africa, Mr. Gibson. The Jesus who takes sides with the poor. The Jesus who confronts oppressive leaders and naked pride. The Jesus who does not merely offer heaven hereafter, but demands justice here and now. The Jesus who does not merely forgive sin but changes societies." And then, dropping his voice to a whisper, he became intensely personal. "When I pray," Traoré whispered, "I don't imagine the cross alone. I imagine Jesus as a young man maybe my age. I see him standing in front of his busy country and thinking he'd sooner die than live as a slave. I see him seeing hungry children while the wealthy indulged, and having the courage to speak up, knowing it would cost him everything." Through the studio, Gibson's breathing had become shallow. His hands now grasped together as if in prayer themselves, his previously calm face showing cracks of emotion. "This," Traoré urged softly, "is why I became a leader. Not for power, but because I could not stand to see my people starve as foreigners grew rich on our gold and our sweat. I could not do nothing while generations were deprived of their future, while treasures of their fathers gathered dust in Parisian vaults. I recalled that Jesus did not just pray for change. He was the change." Slouching slightly toward the camera, his voice turned intimate, nearly confessional. "Do you know what I believe Jesus would do if he were sitting with me right now, Mr. Gibson? He would say, 'Ibrahim, much has been given to you. Your education, your people's trust, this very moment in time. What will you do with it? Will you serve yourself, or will you lift up the least among your brothers and sisters?'" By this time, Gibson's calm was falling apart. His eyes welled and overflowed, quiet tears streaming down his face. Traoré's voice became stronger, with a weight of prophecy. "I think Jesus would say what he said to his disciples. The greatest among you will be a servant. The first will be the servant of all. And so before I make any choice, I must ask, does this serve the poor? Does this serve justice? Does this set the oppressed free? If not, then it is not Christ that I serve, it is Caesar." The radical change in the studio was undeniable. One of Hollywood's greatest egos was discomfited, shaken not by drama or spectacle, but by the unshakable word of a quiet-spoken African statesman. "Mr. Gibson," Traoré continued softly, as if feeling the sensitivity of the moment, "your movie, The Passion of the Christ, touched millions. It indicated the extent of his love. But I challenge you, depict the Jesus who lived for us and the one who died for us. Depict the Jesus who instructed that love without justice is not whole, and that faith without deeds is dead." By then, Gibson's veneer had been lost completely. There were no glossed-over soundbites remaining, only unvarnished humanity. Traoré leaned in closer, desperation in his voice. "Your platform has been so much gifted to you. Millions are listening when you talk. What if you use that power not just to describe Christ's agony, but to unveil his revolution? to remind the world that in following him is to stand among the downtrodden, to confront the mighty, and to proclaim a vision of dignity, freedom, and bread for all children. Tears, for the first time, gave Gibson his voice. Shaking, unstable, a far cry from the authoritative voices he used to carry with swagger. "Captain Ibrahim." He murmured, employing the young commander's first name slowly. I thought I knew Christ." The interview continued for another 20 minutes, but the positions had been turned around in full. Gibson, the great storyteller who was used to being asked questions, now listened with awed seriousness. Traoré, the young soldier-turned-leader, had taken on the role of teacher. They talked together about faith in action, about liberation theology, and about the tremendous burden cast upon leaders of influence. As the broadcast ended, Gibson sat quietly, hands still folded, unable to fill the air with Hollywood sheen. Host Sarah Chin, visibly shaken herself, could do no more than whisper, "That was remarkable. Captain Traoré, Mr. Gibson. Thank you, for perhaps one of the most compelling interviews this show has ever had." What ensued was a firestorm. The interview went viral within days. Footage of Gibson weeping was repeated millions of times. Whole debates ensued in churches, universities, and living rooms, on faith, social justice, and Christ's living message. Gibson himself would go on to call the moment life-altering. In later interviews he confessed, "Ibrahim introduced me to a Jesus I thought I knew, but had somehow forgotten. He reminded me that Christianity is not simply personal salvation, but about courage to change society itself. It is about kingdom work here and now, not heaven someday." For Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the interview reinforced a vision already taking shape within him, that genuine leadership cannot exist without faith in action. He went on speaking forthrightly of the unbreakable relationship between spirituality and social justice, correlating Christ's message with Africa's struggle for dignity and sovereignty. And yet, of all the words spoken, Gibson's shaking words, unprepared by truth, rang out most loudly in the hearts of viewers. "I thought I knew the gospel. Listening to you." Gibson's voice broke with the force of his admission. "God forgive me. I've been concentrating on the wrong things." On screen, Captain Traoré's face eased. His voice changed from impassioned zeal to fraternal pity. "No, my brother," he said gently. "You have not been chasing the wrong things. You've been lifting up something sacred. The cross is at the center of our faith. But perhaps now it is time for us to also focus on the life that led to that cross, the teachings so radical they made the cross inevitable." Gibson wiped his moist face on his sleeve, publicly crying in front of millions without a care for pretension. His next statement came as a whisper breaking forth from a man who at last gained clarity of sight. "You're right. Jesus wasn't divine alone. He was revolutionary. He was threatening to the status quo because he required individuals to decide, will you serve God or will you serve power?" Traoré gravely nodded, as if affirming a truth both ancient and present. "Just so. And it is the very same decision before us today. Every day, every generation, every nation, we must choose. Will we worship the living God of justice and love? Or will we bow to the gods of wealth, greed, and power?" The studio lamps went dark. The camera dissolved. But the question, it did not dissolve. It was there, ringing, an echo in the heart of each viewer. Even as the broadcast concluded, the pressure of the moment was felt, a challenge that no screen could hold, a question not for Mel Gibson, but for all of us.